Thank you very much. Hopefully you are all expecting to see something about Jupyter Notebooks. So who am I? Well, my name's Rob and I look a bit like that. Well, actually, I look exactly like this because here I am. I'm a consultant. I go around helping companies automate things normally in the data world. The best place to find me is on Twitter. So if you've got any questions, if you think of something, please feel free. SQL DBA with beard. Now notice it is with beard and not with a beard because Twitter has a 15 character limit. So when I first changed my handle, I became SQL DBA with a bear, which is cool, but I let it go. In the data world, I'm an evangelist for DBA tools. We're writing a book called DBA Tools in a Month of Lunches, DBA checks, ADS notebooks, data Saturdays. And I'm lucky enough in that I work in both the PowerShell community and the data community. But that's enough about me. I'm not a data scientist. So why on earth do I need Jupyter Notebooks? So these two fine folk here are Terry and Simon. And Terry and Simon work with data scientists who do modeling and predictions and Spark and R and Python and stuff I just don't understand. But I love Jupyter Notebooks. This is Jupyter. Of course, this is the planet Jupiter, taken on a flyby by Juno, one of the rockets going past. And that's not the Jupiter we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about this Jupiter, the one with a Y. The name comes obviously from the planet Jupiter. They wanted a name evoking traditions and science and relating to Julia and Python and R, which were the main languages that they used. But most importantly, they chose the name because Galileo was the first person to discover the moons of Jupiter. And when he did so, he included his data and his working out in his publication, which meant that other people could take that same data and go and work it out themselves. And that's what data scientists do. So that's one of the reasons that they use this name. Okay, Rob. So what is a Jupyter Notebook? Well, first of all, before I tell you this, I want to show you the best reason for having a Jupyter Notebook when you're not a data scientist. Let's go back in time. Let's go a long way back in time, when even Mark's beard wasn't grey, a decade and a half ago. We're running queries and Houston, we've had a problem. You see, what we used to do was use these boxes to run queries against our databases and return us data. And if we look at all of these different PowerShell versions, they all have the same problem. Even Visual Studio Code, the new cross-platform amazing piece of software, still has the same problem. Let's point it out. Saying in SSMS, just imagine it's 3 o'clock in the morning, because these things always happen at 3 o'clock in the morning. And you've been called out and you've had to open your laptop and not wake the baby, and you've run a query and, maybe it's this query. Okay, it's AdventureWorks, but maybe it's this query. And when you ran this query, you saw that, customer ID number 5 had a store ID of 1026. And you went, hang on a minute, wasn't that changed today? Perhaps that's the problem. That should be something else. So you go off and you go and you fix your error. Even if you use Azure Data Studio, still got the same problem. Because once you've hit that cross, this cross here, Your data, your results, well, you see, they're just gone. They're gone. Ah, you want to see them again? They're gone. Now, at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, you go into your office and you have a wash-up meeting or a retrospective or whatever it is that you call it, where you talk about the incident that happened and you explain that, well, yeah, I saw that customer ID number 5 had had a store ID of 1026 and I knew that was wrong. And your colleague who's been asleep all night and probably had both cups of coffee in the morning says, no, 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 if it had been 1026, then you would have seen X and Y and the left-handed thread waddle would have gone wrong as well. And you're like, no, 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 look. And you open your laptop and it's all gone. Just imagine how much better it would be if you could have recorded your steps as you went through that process. The scripts that you ran, the results that you got, so that then you could attach them to the incident, or you could bring them to this meeting and you could say, this is what I ran and these are the results I got. And then I ran this and these are the results I got. And then I ran this and this improved it. And you can see that because these are the results that I got. All within a notebook. Still haven't told you what a Jupyter Notebook is. What is it that does all of this magic? Well, see, I used to be a production DBA. So I like things explained in nice, clear terms. And a Jupyter Notebook is a document that can contain text, code, executable code, images, and the query results. Oh, magic. So where do we run our notebooks? In the main, right now, I'm going to say use Azure Data Studio. And in Azure Data Studio, which is a cross-platform environment that you can use to connect to your data platform. Does slightly different things to Management Studio, but if you're going to be running queries, it's pretty good. If you want some additional color and some magic overlays, then it's pretty neat. That Azure Data Studio looks just like Visual Studio Code. And that's true, because this is Azure Data Studio and this is Visual Studio Code. And Azure Data Studio is based upon the code base that Visual Studio Code uses. There are some things added to Azure Data Studio, colors normally. You see we've got a kind of registered service type list there that we can color code. You've got different overlays and widgets that you can add into Azure Data Studio. Things that are missing are debug experience, a real deep development experience for languages like PowerShell. But overall, they do the same thing. So when I talk about any shortcuts or any little keyboard things that we can do in one of Azure Data Studio or Visual Studio Code, you can do them in either. I did say mainly I recommend that you use Azure Data Studio. And there's some real good reasons that we'll go into. But recently, .NET Interactive Notebooks have taken leaps and bounds moving forward. The Azure Data Studio team, the tools team, and the .NET Interactive team have gone together. This blog post will explain more about it. And whilst you've got .NET Interactive Notebooks and they've been around for a while, now .NET Interactive Notebooks have got T-SQL as well. They're basically Jupyter Notebooks, but you've got added PowerShell Core, C#, X#, HTML, JavaScript. And for us, perhaps T-SQL might be interesting too. So these are new. And what you're going to need to do if you want to run .NET Interactive Notebooks with T-SQL is download the .NET 5.0 SDK. Use whichever one of those works for your particular operating system. Now, what you might find, if you're a person like me that likes to fiddle and install things and play with things, is you might need to uninstall any existing .NET SDKs that you've got and then install this one again, or it might even say it wants to repair. I had to go through that circle to get this to work, but only once, and it is entirely my fault for fiddling. But once we've got that .NET SDK installed, then we need a .NET Interactive Notebooks extension, which only is available in Visual Studio Code. So you go and you click on that install button, or you search for it within Visual Studio Code itself. And then we use Control, Shift, and P. Control, Shift, and P. Remember, Control, Shift, and P. It's really important because it's the way to access the command palette in both Visual Studio Code and Azure Data Studio. And what we'll do is we'll then use the .NET Interactive Create New Blank Notebook command. And that's going to create you a new notebook in Visual Studio Code. Now, visually, notebooks in Visual Studio Code don't look as good as in Azure Data Studio. But you'll end up with something that looks like this. And it quite probably will look like this. And it's not what you want. Because as you can see here, this is a .NET C# notebook. So what you've got to do is you've got to click on that and change it to be a .NET Interactive notebook. Then you'll see that in the cell, it says C#, but it says .NET Interactive. And down at the bottom, it also says .NET Interactive. Once you've got that, you know that you've got a .NET Interactive notebook running. So with a .NET Interactive notebook, you've got the ability to have different blocks using different languages. So the top block is a SQL.NET Interactive block. And this one is a C# .NET Interactive block. And what I did, and what I'll show you, is that literally I just typed select star from sys.databases. And it says, hang on a minute, I can't do that. A SQL connection hasn't been established. Please install these things. And it gives you the code to do it. And once you put the code in, this one's SQL.NET. This is the commands that you get, that you run, and the results that you get. And then you change it to C#. I've forgotten how my slides go, as you may have noticed. Then we do this, which installs our .NET Interactive SQL Server package. Now what I need to do is I need to create what they call a kernel, what I call a SQL connection, to be honest. And I use this magic command here. So I use a hash and a bang, and I say connect MS SQL, because we're connecting to a SQL server. I give it a name, and that name is for me. So the kernel name is something for me to use so that I can recognize which instance and which database I'm connecting to. And then we pass in a connection string, just like you'd build a connection string for anything else. And once I've done that, it then tells me I've added you a kernel, and I've called it SQL-our Beard Desktop Master, because Beard Desktop is my instance and the master database is the one I'm connected to. Then I can write a select name from sys.databases again, and it goes, hang on a minute, yeah, I know what you want to do. Would you like to use this kernel? These are the ones I've got. So I've got a Beard Desktop Master. Perhaps that's what you want to do. If you paste this magic command, another hash and a bang, SQL dash, then you can run your SQL code. Then, just like magic, we can run our query and we can get our results back into our .NET Interactive Notebook. I'm going to mention this purely because you will use Google and you may see it. If you use the PowerShell Preview extension in Visual Studio Code, there is something called Notebook Mode. What notebook mode means is we have turned the comments in the script into Markdown. Well, that's it, actually. That's all it means. It will run the code, but the output comes out in the terminal and isn't saved. It exists. If it's of use to you, please feel free, go and use it. So we've got our notebooks. What do we do with them? Well, we talked about incident response. We talked about the ability to have our queries that we ran and the results that we got back saved. We could also take that a step further and build run books for incident response. So that when this thing happens, we can pull up a notebook, we can follow the steps through, we've got our results, we can attach it back to our incident management system. Or perhaps we use run books for common tasks, things that we do regularly. That query that James from HR is always asking you to run. Perhaps you could put that into a notebook. How about, especially in these days of remote working, when new people start in your team, how cool would it be to be able to give them a set of notebooks with instructions and images so they can go and query your instances, understand what your naming convention is. You can explain how to get to your CMDB or which agent jobs you run to do this, or how your sys packages are set up, whatever it is that you're interested in passing on. You can use it for demos. Demos to your clients, demos to your team members, demos to your boss, presentations like today, or showing off your open source projects. I mean, really, the sky's the limit. Let your imagination run wild. But let me show you how Microsoft did it. So this slide has been taken with permission by Julie, who's a member of she's a PM at the Microsoft SQL Server tools team. And one of the things they do internally is they've got an instant response system with people who respond to incidents, as you'd expect. And an incident gets reported. Maybe it's an alert from a monitoring system. Maybe it's a user phoning up saying this has gone wrong. And the person who's a member of this team responds to this message in some way. And what they want to do is they want to investigate what the problem is and hopefully mitigate it. And they go to the troubleshooting repository and they go, have we got a notebook that looks like it's to do with this issue? And if they have, they open it up in Azure Data Studio and they fix the problem. And once the problem's fixed, they look at the notebook. If need be, they improve it so that the next time somebody hits this problem, it'll be better. They might use it in post-mortem discussions and they attach it to the incident. If they update the notebook, they update the source control. Troubleshooting repository is then kept up to date. They also have a rating system for their notebooks. But if the problem doesn't exist as a notebook, then they start a new notebook. And then they run through the process of investigating what the problem is and mitigating what the problem is. Then they probably need to spend a bit of time cleaning up this notebook, making it look presentable, and then they add it into the troubleshooting repository so that the next person coming along can pick up a new notebook that will help them resolve that. At all times, they log their notebooks back into the incident response system because they've got the queries that were run and the results that came from those queries. And they've automated a lot of this. It's all done with DevOps. It's all controlled in source control, CI/CD. But that's really enough talking. Really what you want to do is you want to see this thing in action. But perhaps you want to know, how did I do this? Well, there's a link that will show you exactly how I did this. But all it took is a little bit of PowerShell, PowerPoint, obviously, to do the presentation. And I use Streamlabs OBS. If you are a person who uses OBS, then Scott Hanselman's written a C# program that kind of does the same sort of thing. So even though we all have to be remote, we all have to work in Zoom and Teams and all of this thing, let's still have a little bit of fun. Do we have any questions? Let's go to there. Ta-da, it's me. How are we doing there?
Hi there. Yes, we can ask. You can hear me? Hopefully.
I can hear you. Yes, sir.
Good stuff. Okay, so yeah, we can ask a couple of questions got so far. What are the What about the environments that are offline, i.e., they have no internet? How do they get Data Studio?
You can download the offline installer just like you would for any product that you were going to install. It makes it more difficult to keep it up to date for offline environments, and it is more tricky to get your Python installation working, which is what Jupyter's using in the background to run the notebooks. But you just have to download an offline installer. Hopefully that process will get better in the future. I know that they are at least thinking about it.
Okay, cool.
Is there an easy way or a command to run a list of the magic commands so you can get all your preloaded connections somehow?
Oh, let me come back to that in a minute or two when we do a demo, and I'll answer that question. Well, I'll answer some of that question.
Perfect.
Right, that's all we've got for now.
Okay. So because it's new and shiny, I'm going to just tease you with a .NET Interactive because it's new and shiny. So this is a .NET Interactive notebook. And as you can see, we have, there we go, SQL.NET Interactive block.
I think we're missing your screen share.
Oh, you are, aren't you? I pressed all of the buttons apart from the blue one that says share. How about now?
That's perfect. It was lovely seeing your face for a longer period, but this is just as good as well.
So here's the .NET Interactive notebook running in Visual Studio Code. You see we've got a blue icon up the top, cross legs, that's our Visual Studio Code. And this is a SQL.NET Interactive block, and you see the second one down is a C#. So two different languages running in the same notebook. And what we've written is just a tsql command, select star from sys.databases. And when we click this play button, it comes up and it says, hey, I don't have a connection. This is what you need to do. And it gives you the commands that you could then copy and paste in the next block. What it doesn't tell you is that this block needs to be a C#.NET Interactive one. So you might need to click on it like this and choose the correct language. But we've already done that. Now we can press play. And that's going to install this Microsoft.NET Interactive SQL Server version. And it does it quicker than I can say it. And then, then it will show you what you can do. So, Mikhail, to give you some example, a lot of these magic commands you have to read this for, or you can run the command for help, which I'll show you in a minute, and that'll show you some more. Once we've got this installed, we can then create ourselves a kernel. It's not a real kernel. The name kernel is being used for all sorts of things these days. So a kernel is, in my mind, always a Linux kernel. It's an operating system, deep level thing. They use the name kernel to mean a different language in a Jupyter notebook. And now they're using kernel to mean a SQL Server database connection. But here's what it is. We've got a kernel. We're calling it big desktop master, and it's a connection string. So we're going to the master database, and we're all running on localhost. And once we press that, it just says, yes, I added this kernel. Now, once I select from a database, again, in a SQL Interactive code block, it goes, hang on a minute, we can't do that yet. You can only do that to one of the following connected SQL kernels. So you got to put this magic command in here. And now we have our data and our results. That's a bit dull. It's just a name of databases. How about if we do something a bit more interesting? So let's connect to a different database. And to do that, we're going to create another kernel. So this one's called Beard Desktop Speaking. It's my database of all of my speaking engagements. Now I can run a SQL command. And now you can see that what I've got here is my list of connected SQL kernels. So Mikhail, this is the other part here. Can I have a list of what's connected? Yes, but they're only connected for the lifetime of this notebook. So as soon as this notebook's finished, this process is finished, they won't be connected anymore. But you'll have all of your setup within the notebook. So now that I've got that, I can pick some data. I come on here, and then you see that I've got over here, I've got some lovely magic visualizations. Now that query is not going to give me anything useful. This query really doesn't give much useful, but it does mean that what I can do is I can show you that you can get some visualizations out of your data. Okay, it's not awesome data to get that from, but it gives you an idea of the possibilities that you have within your notebook. So that's pretty cool. Hope you'd agree. Now, even better, I could just change this one. And let's do PS version. Now, within my notebook, in my code cell, I always have IntelliSense, no matter which language it is that I'm using. And now we've got a notebook that's running some C# here. And okay, the C# just picking up a kernel, but we're running some C#, we're running some T-SQL, and we're also running some PowerShell, all within the same notebook. That you can only do in a .NET interactive notebook in Visual Studio Code. These are the new shiny. It's beautiful. I love it, but it is only available in Visual Studio Code. So before I run back into Azure Data Studio and what I call not .NET notebooks, are there any questions about the cool new .NET interactive notebooks?
Yeah, yes and no. So if I'm using VS Code or Data Studio for Jupyter Notebooks, do I also need to install Jupyter Notebooks to have that support?
For this, yeah, because naming things is hard and communication with other teams is hard, it's there are a number of different notebooks that we have available to us. So this is the brand new .NET Interactive Notebook experience, and you can only get that with this .NET Interactive Notebooks extension in Visual Studio Code. So to do this bit, no, you don't need to have Jupyter installed. You don't need to have Python installed. You only need this notebook. It's all running from .NET. You do need to have the .NET 5 SDK, but that's all.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It's not as easy as that, of course. Why would it be? Because what we've got here, this is Visual Studio. This is not Visual Studio Code. This is Azure Data Studio, as we can see up here. We've got a different icon, and we're in white. And now we're going to talk about notebooks. And both not .NET notebooks and the .NET notebooks that I'll show you in Azure Data Studio, they do require you to have Python and Jupyter installed. However, in Azure Data Studio, they will take care of that for you completely. So what we'll do is we'll do Control, Shift, and P, and we will toggle screencast mode. Because then I can do Control, Shift, and P, because you need to remember this, because this is how we open up the command palette in Visual Studio Code or Azure Data Studio. And I'm going to type notebook. And when we type notebook, it gives us the commands that we've got available to us. So we've got a new notebook command here. This is going to open a not.NET notebook. Here we go. You're going to see that I've got a whole bundle of .NET Interactive notebooks. These are a different .NET Interactive notebook from the one that you've just seen in Visual Studio Code. I'm sorry it's so confusing. It's not my fault, honest guff. But we're going to open a new notebook, and this is what our notebook looks like. So in our notebook, at the top, we've got the ability to add a cell. And we can add either a code cell or a text cell. Text cell is going to be Markdown. We've got a box here that says run all. That's going to run all of the code blocks sequentially within the notebook. We've got this word kernel again. And this time the word kernel means the language of the notebook. So this is a SQL notebook at the moment. And because it's a SQL notebook, what we have is the ability to attach it to a connection. And confusingly, even though you've got a select connection, you will need to click on the change connection to be able to connect to your instance in your database. Over on this side, thank you. Over on this side, we've got some more icons. This one is the most important one of all. As an EBA, this one clears all of the results out of your notebook. So let's attach our notebook to an existing connection. So we'll pick our Beard desktop. Let's connect to this. And now we can select, there we go, select star from DBO dots. Oh, can't do that. Let's do sys dots databases, and we'll press play. There we go. We've got our query and we've got some results. And you can see that within our results, we've got the ability to export them in a number of ways. And we also have the ability to visualize them as well. We want to add a new cell. We can add a cell over here. And here's something I quite often do. So we'll quite often do something like select get date as date of now. And we'll select mark. And we'll just run that. So what we've got here is we've got our date right now. In the UK, it is 1938, and it's Mark, because Mark's here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. So Mark, what's happened to my data, my results of my query?
Good question. I would hazard to guess, say you've lost them.
You'd think so, but I can just open up Azure Data Studio and notice that I haven't even saved this notebook. This notebook has not been saved. Now, I do not recommend that you do it like this, but it is as cool as chips to be able to show you that I still have my results inside my notebook from the query that I've run, even though I've just banged the application completely away. Now, I have been doing this for 18 months, and probably twice in those 18 months has this autosave feature not saved me. And I've done a lot of presentations, and I've used this professionally at many different clients, and it has saved me when I've had a power cut. It has saved me when Windows has just gone bang for some reason. It saved me when I've lost a connection to my remote machine. It is absolutely fantastic. So what is a notebook? Well, if we actually save it now, And we'll save it as c/temp/hybrid. And then we'll jump back into Visual Studio Code, and we'll do a get. Thank you. Oh, we'll do it there. We'll do a get content and c/temp/hybrid. And you, not very easy to see, is it? So we'll just put the results into the clipboard. If I just do one pipe, and we will paste them into here. And what you'll see is that a Jupyter Notebook is basically just a load of JSON. Starts off with this top block, which has got the metadata, what type of notebook it was. It was a SQL notebook. And then we've got cell type of code, because we wrote some code, the code that we ran, and then our output tells us that 20 rows were affected, tells us how long it took to run our query, and then it has our results. So we've got our results. But here's the thing. If we look at our results, we've got from here is our fields all the way down to, crikey, this database's view is awful, isn't it? Look at it, look. So these are all of our columns. And then this is our first row, all 85 columns of it. And this one is our second row, and this one is our third row. And here's the thing, is that if your query brings back a gigabyte of data, then your notebook is going to be a gigabyte in size. If your notebook is a gigabyte in size, Azure Data Studio is going to maybe struggle to run it. I don't know what the limit is. It's going to depend on your machine, but you know, a big notebook, it's going to struggle. Secondly, if this is your birth date and you've retrieved it from a database quite diligently, quite professionally, you're allowed to, you want to think about where you're saving these notebooks, because this is just a JSON file stored on disk, might have PII data in it. And thirdly, because I'm a DBA, is that if I did something like this and went, well, no, I didn't run that there, and it wasn't Mark, and I save it as c/temp/my notebook. I'll replace it? Yeah, go on, I'll replace it. If I come back and look in here, go where we want it, you can see that the date of now has suddenly changed to tomorrow, and Mark's magically changed to Rob. I show you that so that you know that it exists, not for any other reason. But just think about what you're doing with your data. Now, I said before that Azure Data Studio is where I would really think that you should use notebooks. And let me show you why. So we do Control-Shift and P, and we'll open up a new notebook. Now, we talked about queries, we talked about results, we've seen that bit of it, but there was that other bit, wasn't there? There was a bit about adding text. And we can add text here, so you can start typing like this, put a heading in. This is my heading. I can write some. Now, that's one way of doing it. Personally, I like to use this view because I'm quite comfortable in writing in Markdown. So I know that I can just have a heading here, and then I can start writing bullet points, and as you can see, it shows on the right Let's go over here, live, view. So I like that sort of thing. That's really comfortable for me to working. If you're totally comfortable in Markdown, you could just do it straight in Markdown. But I am going to say that what you want to use is this view. This is the default view for you. I've changed it. And you're going to want to use this one because we've talked a lot about how you want to have your documentation in a notebook. It'd be really useful to have all of this documentation alongside the code that you write. And I know for a fact that a lot of you have got your documentation in, let's not show you that page. That's why we open it down here. You've got a lot of that documentation in OneNote. Go on, go big up there. Or don't go big up there. There we go. So you got it in Notebook, in OneNote. So you're going to have some documentation. It's going to be bullet lists. You're going to have some images, perhaps, and this is just a description of Git flow. But you can see this is my documentation. Now if I do Control A again because it's weird, Control C, and then I go back to my notebook, and then I do Control and V. Look at this. I'll just plink it down a couple. So you can see that we've just copied that right over. How neat is that? But it doesn't just work with, OneNote. Perhaps you want to do something like this. So maybe you want to see behind the scenes and see what's going on. So you could just take a screenshot and then paste it. And there we have what was happening right at that moment. That's a bit of my obs, and it's some of the Zoom calls, so you can see everybody's here. If we look at this in the Markdown view, you see what's happened is it's being changed into a base 64 encoded image. So it can make it a little bit tricky to work with when you want to work with Markdown, but it is still as cool as chips. Maybe we want to take something like this, and let's look for .NET Interactive with SQL. So here's the page that Maria's written about the .NET Interactive with SQL, and I can just copy that. Let's go down to, I thought we had some screenshots. Yes, we do. Let's go down to here. And we'll copy that, Control C. And we'll come over here, we'll add a new code cell, and we'll paste. What have we done? Let's not add a new code cell. That would be really silly because we need a text cell in the rich text view. And now what you've got is the web page, including the links. And sometimes the images, and sometimes it appears not the images. But you can just copy straight from there. You can copy tables out of Word. You can copy off an Excel sheet. There are all sorts of things they've done just to make this like magic. And this, I reckon, is why you want to use ADS with notebooks, unless you have a particular need to use a .NET Interactive notebook. Because this is cool as chips. So let's have a look at some things that we can do. Now this is a point where, like, literally ask me anything, because I have notebooks all over the place and I love to just show them off. So whatever it is that you would like to see, let me know. But let's start by doing something weird. Let's connect to, let's make sure we're up and running. Let's connect to Benji. Benji is my Azure Arc enabled data services running on Kubernetes. It's a Linux machine, just to show you that it doesn't matter. It's just a database. We can connect to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect to that using, no, that's the wrong shortcut. Let's try that one. Using a PowerShell. So this is a normal PowerShell notebook. And whilst it's doing its thing, I'll tell you that on a Windows machine, this is going to run Windows 5.1. On anything other than a Windows machine, this is going to be running PowerShell 7.0.0. So it's a hard-coded into the package. This is running using Jupyter, which is Python. It sends the commands off to the Python package. The Python package will then grab those commands and send them to the hard-coded, come on, show me, the hard-coded PowerShell executable, and that will then start running the code, and then it sends the results back to the package, which sends them back to the notebook. And as you can imagine, with all of those layers of complexity, it works perfectly all of the time. Okay, maybe sometimes it doesn't quite work. But we just created a number of random users and random roles. So I literally have no idea what's been done here. We've added a load of users. But it means that I can show you something like this. So what I've got is a notebook that runs PowerShell that will automatically take an instance that you pass in and get me all of the permissions and color code them and put them into an Excel sheet. And we created, well, I created this because the team I was working with constantly had people coming and asking them for who's got permissions to this database, what permissions are there available on this system. And there were like 5 or 6 different teams within the business that kept coming back to this DBA team repeatedly asking what permissions for this, what permissions for this, what permissions for this. And they were just running a query, copying it out, putting it into Excel, sending it to the person. Oh no, that's not quite right. It doesn't look pretty, etc. So I gave them this. And it just opens up an Excel sheet and it says, this is the user permissions for each database on this instance at this date. Gives them some information on the Excel sheet, tells them they can filter by database in the object column, and they can filter by user or group or login in the member column. Boom, there we go. We can see that Benjamin, Mr. Weissman, is got some permissions. Let's look at our Janice. We'll look at Benny and, I don't know, Mrs. Fogchuk. And we can see that they've got different levels of permissions. A DB owner on AdventureWorks. Some of them have got deny. Benji's got deny on the factory audit database. We can do all of our filtering. It's a neat piece of Excel automation, but you don't even have to know how to do all of this PowerShell to make it work, because all you need to do is set the right instance and press this button. And that leads me neatly on to another point. So if you go to beard.media/notebooks with a capital N, has to be a capital N, it's going to take you straight to my GitHub repository. And then you can click on the notebooks link and you can click on not.net, and we were auditing, and this was instant permissions to Excel. And what you'll find is something amazing about GitHub is it will render the notebooks in the browser so that you can see them. So you can't run this code, but you can at least see the code. And you can also see, if I haven't cleared it out, I have cleared it out. If I haven't cleared it out, you would be able to see that there were some results. So it'll even keep the results there for you. We've got some results here. Nope, I've been too good and I've cleaned everything up. But you get the point. Within GitHub, you can then view all of the notebook as it looks, whether you got results saved or you haven't got results saved. So that, I think, is really neat, because it means that I could create a notebook with a load of queries in it and some results. And I could send it to Mark and I could say, Mark, look, I'm doing this and I'm getting that. What's going on? It doesn't make sense. And Mark could take that notebook and he could either just read through it and point out, Rob, you're being stupid because you don't know T-SQL, you should do this. And I'd say, thank you very much. Or he could open it up in Azure Data Studio. He could connect to, say, AdventureWorks, and he could run through the notebook exactly like I've done and got the results, fix my queries, prove that the results were correct, save the notebook and send it back to me. So there's another really great use case for using notebooks. If there are questions, just shout them out. Otherwise, I just sort of kind of keep going. Because I could show you something else. Cool. Because before I did all of that automation with PowerShell, I did have, if we have a look at Beard Desktop, I did have a T-SQL query, which would give me some roles from my logins and the database role members for my databases. So that's pretty cool. Now I've got it on a T-SQL notebook. But maybe I just want to check that every night. So that would be good. Let's use this button up here at the top, clear all of our results, and we'll save this. And the thing I've got to remember to do is to go and copy the path, because I generally fail to remember to do that bit. And we'll go to our connections and we'll right click on our Beard Desktop instance and click on Manage. And now you're going to see some of the cool things that you get in Visual Studio, that you don't get in Visual Studio Code, but you do get in Azure Data Studio. So you get information about all of your databases, you get some server reports, you've got SP Who is active installed, you can get some information about that as well. You've got always on insights, you've got EB insights, there's all sorts of good stuff going on here. But let's look at the agent. So we're going to have a look at the agent, and along the agent to see what jobs we've got. And now we're just going to click on notebooks. And then we've got this button here that says new notebook job. Excellent. Notebook path. Right. Luckily, I remembered to paste that today. So that's the path to our notebook where we've got our notebooks. I'm going to select a database and I'm going to select, I don't know. I'm going to select Stack Overflow for no other reason than because I can. I'm going to execute in master because this database is for gathering logins, and we're going to call it hybrid job permissions, and we're going to fill in the description. It's notebook for gathering permissions. I know it's a bit boring watching somebody write in about descriptions, but just imagine that I'm the person that's coming to work at your place next. I want to have a description in this so I know what's going on. We created a notebook, and what do we do? Where do we put it? We put it in Stack Overflow. So if we have a look in Stack Overflow, if we could have a look in Stack Overflow. Okay, let's disconnect and reconnect. And now I'd like to have a look in Stack Overflow. And in Stack Overflow, we've got a load of tables. And one of those tables is called Notebooks, NB Materialized. And that's got nothing in it at the moment. It's got a materialized ID, a job ID, a runtime, run date, notebook, error. Okay. And here we've got our template. Template's got a template ID, a job ID, what notebook we've got. And if we look here at our notebook, it looks suspiciously like some JSON because it's some JSON, because that's what a notebook is. And if we come back to here and we find our hybrid job permissions job and we run it and the agent isn't running, then what we have to do is start our agent. So we'll start our agent. And then when you click run, it says down at the bottom, hybrid job permissions, job was successfully started. Awesome. And we'll refresh. Still running. What we're doing here is we're running our notebook against the master database, because that's where we've set it. And then we're going to save the results in the Stack Overflow database in this materialized table. And even better than that, it doesn't normally take this long. There we go. It has succeeded. So even better than that, when I double click on this, what I get is a notebook. And you can see it's got a name, about the job and the time that it was run. And then it's got the code that we've run, obviously, and it's got the results that we had. So I could keep doing that, save that on a schedule, and if I ever wanted to know who had which permissions at which time, I can just go and open the notebook and have a look. I could save it, attach it to an incident, I can use it in whatever way I need to. Super cool way of using it. There are some caveats here. So it will not work on any SQL instance older than 2016. I did get it working on 2014 using DBA tools to alter the job. So I could run a notebook, but I couldn't get it inside this GUI. It doesn't work with named instances. And remember what I said before, that a gigabyte of results or something along those lines means that you're going to run out of ability to open your Azure Data Studio. The other consideration is if you have a large number of code blocks, a large number, maybe 25-ish, is not a fixed figure, but at somewhere around that region, you'll find that if you press this run all button in your notebook, all that will happen is Azure Data Studio will crash. The notebook just won't work. It's just not capable of doing it. But if you're in a notebook agent job, that's literally what it's doing. It's literally just pressing that run all button and waiting for the results to come back. And that means that if you try and run a notebook with an awful lot of cells, it just crashes and you just get nothing. So there are some caveats there, but it is, as you can see, really useful, really good way of gathering information. I've stopped for a minute. So if anybody would like to ask me questions or what about or can you show me, then now's a good time to do it, and maybe that'll send me down another rabbit hole.
Got a quick question here. So Microsoft got rid of notebooks.azure.com some time ago. If I want to continue using notebooks in the cloud, ideally for free, what are my options?
Oh, so notebooks.azure.com, these are another type of notebooks, aren't they? These are your official Jupyter notebooks for sort of data sciencey people. And the answer to that is, I don't know. Sorry, that's not an area of my expertise, unfortunately. You can, so here's one thing you can do. You can have your notebooks like this in a repository, and I haven't done this since I changed everything over. And you've got this thing called Binder. So I'm going to click that. This may or may not work. I literally have no idea. But mybinder.org enables you to put a Jupyter notebook, a repository of Jupyter notebooks together. And what it might do, if we're lucky, is actually build us a container that will hold all of our notebooks and enable us to run those in the browser. Cool. So you can see here that what we've got is our notebooks. We'll let that run. Like I said, I have, since I've redesigned this, I have not run it in my binder. So we can see what happens. This is literally what it does. We've got a red there, but
so we can take another question while we wait. How often is Azure Data Studio updated, and is there preview features, and are there dangers to enable in production, of course?
Okay, so excellent question. So this is, let's bring it down here. This is Azure Data Studio. So just basic Azure Data Studio. This is updated every month in the same cadence as Visual Studio Code. This is Azure Data Studio Insiders. This is updated every single day. I used Visual Studio Code Insiders for about 15 months at work and had 3 days when I couldn't use it for actual work. So it is pretty good. Are there dangers? Of course there are dangers. There's always dangers when software gets updated. I don't have things that break, as in a notebook that used to work that doesn't work. But yeah, sometimes things go a bit weird. And I truly believe that is the world that we live in now.
But they're so isolated, so you can pretty much run them at the same time.
Well, you just saw then, you know, they're completely isolated.
Perfect.
I generally use Azure Data Studio for most of my work and my demos, the standard version, and I use the Insiders version when I want to go and play with things. It, you know, occasionally does happen.
Let's take another quick one here. So you've shown the use of Markdown within the notebooks. Does Data Studio support cool documentation features such as Mermaid?
Excellent question. Honestly, don't know. I would imagine not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into here. So this is Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to type it up there. So Mermaid, you've got in, there we go. So you've got extensions integrated there into Visual Studio Code. I would be astonished if we could find it in Azure Data Studio. Yeah, no. Now, that's not to say that you can't do something. I'm going to just pick that one and copy the extension ID and dive over to here. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get that, which is a shame. What you get is a view that looks like this, but instead this is just a non-interactive one. Instead of just being able to look at it, you can actually go in and click on a job and actually click play here, and you can run them. Now that's not going to work if you want to be connecting back on-prem into SQL instances, but it does enable you to run your notebooks. But I think I've probably broken that in some way. Let's do.
Yeah, because if you go on to Microsoft's notebooks.azure.com website now, they do recommend using GitHub code spaces.
Code spaces are awesome.
Yeah.
I do love code spaces. Right, so let's try this. We've gone to the extension in Visual Studio Code, and instead of installing it, we're going to download it. And then in Azure Data Studio, we can install from VSIX. So click the little 3 doodads, install from VIX. We were in, not that downloads, we were in this downloads. There's our Mermaid. It's third party. Yes, I know, but I'll take a risk. Completed installing, and there we go. So some things work like that. You might have to go and do a manual install to get the extension. Some things just won't. But when they just won't, they'll just fail to install. So that does happen sometimes. There we go. It's cool. I'm learning things. Any more questions? Show me more questions.
Okay, let's go on to a lovely DevOps one then. So are there any ways to automate execution of code blocks in Notebook so that you can deploy through DevOps pipeline and have code run automatically on deploy? Or are you really here just talking about a collaborative workbook strategy?
I am just here talking about a collaborative notebook, but boy, oh boy, do I want to have a notebook I can run in DevOps. And believe me when I tell you, I have asked for that repeatedly from the Microsoft team.
Okay.
So wherever the issue is on, in fact, let's go and find it. GitHub.com, Azure Data Studio. Of course, Microsoft.Azure Data Studio, and we'll go to issues, and we will search for DevOps. Let's search for DevOps and notebook. Okay, I'm gonna have to go and find where that is. Somewhere there is an issue. Go and add your thumbs up and your yes, we'd love that to that, because yeah, it would be a truly awesome thing to be able to have a notebook run.
I have another question related to maybe most related to GitHub then.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the possibilities here of, like you said, sending information to the customer, making them run scripts,
Oh, yes.
and sending the things back to me. So the query goes as this: can we query the results in an offline notebook, like using the notebook as a data collector, getting the results back, and then I continue to use the notebook to analyze further from the data collected by the notebook?
This is my thinking face. I know you can't quite see it. There's no reason why not, because it is just JSON.
But if you have like 5 different data sets, how would you know where they go and how to connect to just that data set?
You're going to have to pass that. You're going to have to pass that that script. So this was my PowerShell that was doing my magic, but the other thing I would like to show you, okay, Control O, is I have written a PowerShell module, and one of the things it does is convert notebooks around and about, which means that I can show you that all you need to do, source, convert JSON to destination source. That's just a replace. That's just a replace. So you're going to have to do this backwards. So that is our base cell that we convert to JSON, and then every time we have a code, we add in our where are you? There you are. We add in our JSON like that. So you're going to you'd have to pass it backwards to go and find your cell type. We have C/temp/hybrid. Oh, you've opened it like that. Of course you have. Yeah. So I'll just open the notebook when I actually want to just grab the
But then could we Could we tag the different cells with names or metadata somehow? So I
Yeah,
know I
you've
need the
got
data from the second cell.
you've got the control for that. Let's grab that, put it in the clipboard, and stick it in there. Control K and then M. Change it to JSON. Control Shift P, and we'll fold everything. Then you can see that what you've got is you've got control, because if you had text markdown, this would be a cell type of text, so you could then say go to the next one, but that's just a block, so you're just going to have to pass your cells to grab each one of these blocks. You know what T-SQL or whatever language you're writing is going to be in your source because you've written it, and then you just look at your outputs, and your outputs are then going to have data like that. So you're just going to have to go and find that and then pull your data back. It's not, I'm not saying, like, believe me, I'm not saying that any of that is easy, but I'm saying that it's doable because it's just JSON.
Yeah, I think I was playing with a JSON, because I've just been Googling now to try and remember what it was. And I think it's called JSON path, because I was trying to kind of query JSON in a tabular format using some kind of parser, and I did it via PowerShell calling something else. And I think I used a language called JSON path, which I found insanely difficult to use. It's a bit like an XML parser. So that's probably what you'd use, I'd expect.
Yeah. You do something, would you convert? Oh, don't do that. Convert to JSON minus depth 5. Oh, you've got more than 5, okay. See, I love that. This is why I love doing this demo, because we just end up going down rabbit holes. Oh, it's got 85 columns in it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I'd do that and then explore that object, but yeah.
But then it is actually possible to do that. It's not easy, but it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty much the answer to the question.
but there again, I mean, it depends how manually you want to be, but you can always export your results into everybody's favorite data analyzer. So that is just, no, don't save this. Put it Excel, thank you very much. So I've just clicked on this little button here in our results, and what that's given me is, oh look, good thing in Excel. So you can control T it and say, control T, yeah, poof. And you're going to go on and go off and do that, aren't you? And say, you know what I mean? You're away then, aren't you?
Yeah.
So it depends how automated you want to make it. I'd probably start off doing that, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, but that's pretty much the end of the question session. So
Okay.
Thanks everybody for joining us, and a big thanks to the Beard and Rob.
Thank you so very much for having me. It's as you can tell, I think this is one of my favorite presentations to do, and every time I do it, it's different because I get great questions. So thank you for having me.